The mining ship Red Falcon drifted through the asteroid field like a metal whale searching for precious ore. Jake Morrison sat alone in the cockpit watching the scanner screens paint green lines across the darkness outside. He had been flying solo, cargo runs for 7 years now, and the loneliness had become his only reliable companion. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he drank it anyway while checking the navigation charts. The nearest station was Luna 7, an old Eldari outpost that most humans avoided. The elf race kept to themselves after the war ended 20 years ago, and both species pretended the other did not exist. A distress signal suddenly lit up his console, making him jump and spill coffee on his worn flight suit. The signal came from Luna 7, broadcasting on all emergency channels. Jake tried to ignore it at first, because getting involved meant trouble, and trouble meant delays, and delays meant less money. But the signal kept repeating, and something about it felt wrong. The automated message was in Eldari, but his translator picked up keywords like attack and survivors and helped. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and thought about all the reasons he should fly away. He turned his ship toward the station anyway. Journey took 3 hours through dense asteroid clusters that scraped against his hull shields. Jake had to manually pilot through the worst sections because the autopilot kept trying to turn back. Every instinct told him this was stupid, but he kept going forward into the dark Luna. 7 appeared on his screens like a broken toy floating in space. Half the station was dark and debris floated everywhere like confetti after a terrible party. Jake counted at least 12 hull breaches, and the docking bay doors hung open like a mouth frozen in a scream. He tried hailing the station but got only static in response. The life support systems were failing according to his scans, and the power core was running on emergency backup. Whatever happened here had been violent and recent. Because some of the debris still glowed with heat, Jake suited up in his emergency gear and grabbed his old plasma rifle from the weapons locker. The rifle had belonged to his father during the war, and still carried scratch marks from battles Jake had only heard about. He checked the charge pack twice before heading to the airlock. The docking bay was a graveyard of broken ships and floating bodies. Jake tried not to look at them as he magnetic boots pulled him along the deck. Emergency lights flickered red and yellow, creating shadows that danced like ghosts. Every sound echoed strangely in the thin atmosphere that remained. He found the first survivors on level 3, where a group of Eldari traders had barricaded themselves in a storage room. They looked at him with suspicious eyes when he helped them to his ship, but they were too weak to refuse human aid. Jake gave them his emergency rations and went back for more survivors. The station computer was still partially working and showed life signs deep in the maintenance section. Jake followed the blinking dots on his handheld scanner, moving through corridors filled with burn marks and blast damage. Someone had fought hard here and lost. The temperature dropped as he descended, and his breath became visible even through his helmet. The artificial gravity failed on level 7, making him float through rooms that looked like someone had shaken them like snow globes. Tools and equipment drifted past his head while he pulled himself along the walls. On level 9, he heard something that made him stop and listen. It sounded like singing, but not quite human and not quite machine. The melody was beautiful and sad and seemed to come from everywhere at once. Jake followed the sound through a maze of pipes and broken machinery. The maintenance tunnel was barely wide enough for him to squeeze through, and his shoulders scraped against both sides. Strange symbols glowed on, the walls in a language older than human space travel. The singing grew louder, and Jake realized it was actually 2 voices harmonizing in an alien scale. At the end of the tunnel, he found a sealed door marked with warning signs in 12 different languages. Jake tried his universal override code, but the door remained locked. The singing stopped, and he heard movement on the other side. "Who walks in the darkness?" a female voice asked in accented English. The words were careful, like she was remembering how to speak his language. "Jake Morrison, human cargo pilot," he answered. "I picked up your distress signal." The door opened slowly, revealing a sight that made Jake forget to breathe. She stood 7 feet tall with silver hair that flowed like liquid mercury. Down her back, her pointed ears were decorated with crystals that caught the emergency lights and threw rainbows on the walls. Her skin was pale blue like winter sky, and her eyes were the greenest thing Jake had ever seen, but it was the 2 creatures. on her shoulders that made him raise his rifle. They looked like dragons from old Earth stories but shrunk down to the size of house cats. Their scales shifted colors constantly from deep purple to bright gold, and their eyes glowed with an intelligence that seemed impossible for something so small. When they saw his weapon, they opened their mouths and showed teeth like tiny diamonds. "Please do not shoot," Luna said, raising her hand slowly. "The dragons are friends, not enemies. They will not harm you, unless you harm me." Jake lowered his rifle but kept his finger near the trigger. He had heard stories about Eldari war beasts, but never seen one up close. The dragons watched him with unblinking eyes, and he noticed their tails were wrapped protectively around Luna's neck. "What happened here?" Jake asked, looking around the destroyed tunnel pirates. Luna answered, and her voice carried centuries of sadness. "They came 3 days ago wanting to steal cargo, but they found something more valuable." She touched one of the dragons gently. "They wanted my children." The dragons made a sound like purring mixed with growling, and Jake realized they understood every word. Their scales brightened when Luna touched them, and dimmed when she mentioned the pirates. These were not simple animals, but something far more complex. Jake counted 17 dead pirates in the corridor behind Luna, and understood that she had not been hiding but hunting. The blood on her ceremonial armor told the story of someone who had fought for days without rest. Her hands shook slightly, and Jake noticed she was swaying on her feet. "You need medical attention," he said. Stepping forward, Luna tried to walk but collapsed forward, and Jake caught her without thinking. The dragons immediately crawled onto his shoulders, and he felt their claws through his suit, but they did not pierce it. They weighed almost nothing, but he could feel heat radiating from their bodies. "My father," Luna whispered, touching a metal bracelet on her wrist. "He is trapped in here and the power is failing. If he dies, I will have no family." Left Jake did not understand what she meant, but he could see the bracelet flickering with weak light. He lifted Luna carefully and was surprised how light she felt for someone so tall. The dragons adjusted their position on his shoulders, and he felt their tails wrap around his arms for balance. The journey back to his ship was slow and dangerous, with Luna unconscious and the dragons watching everything with suspicious eyes. Jake had to stop several times to rest and readjust his grip, but finally made it to the docking bay where his ship waited like an old friend. He placed Luna on the medical bed in his small sick bay, and the dragons immediately curled up beside her like guardian angels. Jake started the automated medical scan and watched the computer try to understand Eldari physiology. The results were confusing, but showed severe exhaustion and dehydration. While Luna slept, Jake went back for the other survivors. Jake worked through the night evacuating survivors from Luna 7, while the strange elf woman recovered in his medical bay. The dragons never left her side except once when the smaller one brought him a tool he had dropped. They were learning to trust him slowly, like wild animals deciding if he was worth their time. By morning, he had rescued 43 Eldari civilians, and his ship was crowded beyond safety regulations. They huddled in his cargo bay, speaking in whispers and avoiding eye contact with him. Some had injuries that his basic medical supplies could not properly treat, but they refused to complain. Luna woke as he was distributing his last food rations to a family with 3 children. The dragons immediately perked up and made sounds like singing birds mixed with wind chimes. She sat up slowly and touched her bracelet, which glowed brighter than before. "You saved them all," she said, looking at the crowd in his cargo bay. "Not all," Jake replied honestly. "I could only reach the ones in the upper levels. The lower sections were completely vented to space." Luna nodded and stood gracefully despite her injuries. The other Eldari gasped when they saw her and immediately bowed their heads. Some whispered words in their language that sounded like prayers. Jake noticed they were not looking at Luna but at her dragons. "You do not know who I am?" Luna said, studying his confused expression. "Should I?" Jake asked. She almost smiled, which transformed her serious face into something beautiful. "I am Luna Starweaver, daughter of War Chief Theron Starweaver and keeper of the last 2 celestial dragons in this sector. These are not pets as you might think, but living weapons created by my ancestors during the first expansion. The Dragons preened at the mention of their importance, and Jake noticed their scales had turned a proud golden color. They looked harmless, sitting on Luna's shoulders. But he remembered the dead pirates and wondered what they could really do. My father led the Eldari fleet during the war with humans, Luna continued. 20 years ago, he was mortally wounded in the Battle of Broken Moons, but before his body died, he uploaded his consciousness into this. She held up the bracelet. It was meant to be temporary until a new body could be grown. But the peace treaty ended those experiments. Jake felt uncomfortable learning about the war since his own father had died in that same battle. But Luna did not seem angry at him for being human. She spoke, matter-of-factly, like she was explaining the weather. The pirates who attacked were not random raiders. Luna said. They were hired by someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. Someone told them about my dragons and that I would be traveling. Through this station, who would do that? Jake asked. Luna touched her bracelet and it projected a hologram of an Eldari man with cruel features. His name is Valdris, my father's former second-in-command. He believes the dragons should be used to restart the war with humans. He has tried to take them before, but this was his boldest attempt yet. The projection disappeared and Luna swayed slightly. Jake reached out to steady her, and one of the dragons climbed onto his arm. It felt like holding a warm piece of living metal that hummed with energy. The dragon looked into his eyes and Jake saw ancient intelligence there. She likes you, Luna said with surprise. Sky rarely trusts anyone besides me. The other one is Storm, and he is more cautious. Storm proved this by staying on Luna's shoulder and watching Jake with suspicion. His scales had turned dark blue like deep ocean water. Sky, meanwhile, had made herself comfortable on Jake's arm and was purring, "We need to get these people to safety." Jake said, "There is a human colony 2 days from here that accepts refugees." "No," Luna said firmly. "Valdris has spies everywhere. If we go to a populated area, he will find us and many will die in the battle. I need to reach the sanctuary of First Light where the dragon eggs are hidden." "Dragon eggs," Jake repeated. "There are more of them." Luna nodded. 12 eggs waiting to hatch, but they need their parents to wake them. Sky and Storm are the last mated pair. If Valdris gets them, he can raise an army of dragons. Loyal only to him, Jake considered his options. He could drop everyone at the colony and walk away from this mess, or he could help Luna protect creatures that could apparently level cities. The smart choice was obvious, but Jake had never been particularly smart. "How far is this sanctuary?" he asked. Luna smiled properly this time. 3 weeks through dead space where no one goes anymore. It was abandoned after the war and the navigation charts were destroyed. "I know those sectors," Jake said. "They are full of debris fields and radiation storms. No one flies through there because it is suicide, unless you have a pilot who knows the secret routes." Luna said, "My father mapped them during the war. The knowledge is in his consciousness, but I need someone to fly while I navigate through his memories." Jake looked at the refugees in his cargo bay and then at the dragon still perched on his arm. Sky had fallen asleep and was making tiny snoring sounds that should have been terrifying, but were oddly cute. "Fine," he said. "But we need supplies first, and my ship needs repairs after flying through that asteroid field." Luna touched her bracelet and it projected a credit transfer number. "This is my family account. Take what you need." The number had more zeros than Jake had ever seen. He stared at it while Luna walked to the cargo bay to speak with the other survivors. Several of them started crying when she spoke to them in their language, and Jake realized she was probably the highest-ranking Eldari they had ever met. Over the next 6 hours, Jake used Luna's credits to buy everything they needed. Food, water, medical supplies, fuel, and weapons filled his cargo hold. The refugees helped organize everything with an efficiency that surprised him. They might fear him, but they worked without complaint. Luna spent the time in his cockpit with her eyes closed and the bracelet glowing. She was communicating with her father's consciousness, learning the secret routes through dead space. Sometimes, she gasped or cried out and the dragons would sing to comfort her. Whatever memories she was experiencing were painful. Jake brought her water and she drank without opening her eyes. Her hand found his and squeezed it during a particularly difficult moment. The contact was brief, but Jake felt electricity run up his arm. That evening they left the station and headed into the void. Jake had never traveled with so many passengers, and the ship struggled with the extra weight the refugees had organized themselves into shifts for sleeping and eating, making the most of the limited space. Luna stayed in the cockpit, guiding him through routes that did not appear on any map. They flew through the wreckage of ancient battles where destroyed ships floated, like metal tombstones. The radiation played havoc with his instruments, but Luna always knew which way to go. On the second day they encountered their first problem. A ship was following them. Jake noticed it on his long-range sensors, trying to match their course through the debris. It was staying far enough back to be barely visible, but it was definitely there. Luna studied the signature, and her face went pale. "Valdris has found us," she said. "How is that possible? Someone on the station must have reported us," Jake said, checking his weapons. They were pathetically inadequate against a military vessel. Luna stood, and the dragons grew agitated. Their scales flickered through angry reds and oranges. "They cannot follow us into the storm ahead, but either can we survive it without protection." "What kind of protection?" Jake asked. Luna looked at her dragons and spoke to them in Eldari. They responded with sounds that seemed like argument. Storm especially seemed upset about something. Finally, Luna turned to Jake with determination in her green eyes. "There is a way, but it requires absolute trust from you," she said. "The dragons can shield your ship, but they need to grow to their battle size. To do that, they need a massive amount of energy." Jake checked his power readings. "We barely have enough to maintain life support." "Not that kind of energy." Luna said. She pulled an ancient blade from her robes. It was crystalline and hummed with its own light. "This is my father's blade, created from compressed star matter. It holds enough power to fuel them, but only someone worthy can activate it." "How do I prove worthy?" Jake asked. "You do not prove it," Luna said. "You simply are, or you are not. If you are not worthy, the blade will kill you instantly." Jake looked at the blade and then at the ship following them. They had maybe an hour before weapons range. He thought about the refugees trusting him with their lives, and Luna trusting him with her dragons. "Give it to me," he said. Luna held the crystal blade carefully, like it might explode at any moment. The dragons watched from her shoulders, with their scales shifting to deep purple, which Jake had learned meant they were worried. The pursuing ship was getting closer, and Jake could now see it was definitely military class, with weapons that could turn his cargo ship into space dust. "Before you take this," Luna said, "you must understand what it means. This blade has been in my family for 1,000 years. Only those who are chosen by it can survive its touch. My father was the last to wield it, and even he struggled with its power." Jake studied the blade more closely. It did not look like metal or any material he knew. It seemed to be made of condensed light that had somehow become solid. Strange symbols moved across its surface like living things swimming in crystal water. "What happens if it accepts me?" Jake asked. "Then you become bonded to it and to us," Luna answered carefully. "The blade will recognize you as family, as protector." As she paused and looked away, as potential mate to the keeper of dragons. Jake nearly choked on air. "Wait." What Luna turned red, which on her blue skin made her look purple. "It is ancient law. Anyone who can wield the family blade is considered worthy of joining the bloodline. My father knows this, which is why his consciousness has been fighting me for 2 days, trying to stop me from giving it to you." The bracelet on her wrist pulsed angrily, and Jake heard a voice speaking in Eldari that sounded extremely upset. Luna argued back in the same language while the dragons made sounds like laughter. "Your father is trapped in a bracelet, and he is still trying to control your life." Jake asked. "Death does not stop Eldari parents from interfering," Luna said with a small smile. "But we have no choice. The storm ahead will tear us apart without protection, and Valdris will capture us if we try to go around." Jake looked at the view screen where the radiation storm waited like a wall of deadly light. It was a ship killer that had claimed hundreds of vessels over the years. The pursuing ship had slowed down, knowing they were trapped. "How exactly will the dragons protect us?" he asked. "Sky and Storm can manipulate energy at the Quantum level when they reach full size, Luna explained. They will create a bubble around your ship that exists slightly outside normal space. The storm will pass through us like we are ghosts, but they need massive power to maintain it. And the blade provides that power, Jake said. Understanding, Luna nodded. The blade will channel through you into them, but the energy transfer might kill you even if the blade accepts you. Humans were not designed for this kind of power. Jake thought about his boring, life-flying cargo between dead rocks. He thought about his empty apartment on Mars where no one would notice if he never came back. He thought about the 43 refugees in his cargo bay who just wanted to live. He thought about Luna, who had trusted him enough to save her life. Be brave, human, she said, holding out the blade. So I grabbed it. The moment Jake's fingers touched the crystal, he felt like lightning had replaced his blood. Every nerve ending fired at once, and he saw colors that did not have names. His vision exploded into fractals of light that showed him glimpses of the past, present, and future all at once. He saw the forging of the blade in the heart of a dying star. He saw generations of Eldari warriors wielding it in battles across the galaxy. He saw Luna's father, young and proud, leading fleets against impossible odds. He saw Luna as a child playing with dragon hatchlings in a garden made of starlight. Then the blade looked at him, not with eyes, but with something far older and more alien. It examined every moment of his life, every choice, every regret, every small act of kindness and selfishness. It weighed his soul on scales that measured courage against fear, love against loneliness, hope against despair. Jake felt himself failing the test. He was just a cargo pilot who had never done anything remarkable. He had no great victories or noble bloodline. He was nobody special, and the blade knew it. But then he felt something else. Two small presences touching, his mind with gentle warmth. Sky and Storm were there, showing the blade what they saw in him. They showed it how he had risked his life for strangers, how he had given his food to hungry children, how he had chosen to help when running would have been easier. The blade considered this new information. Then it decided. Power flooded through Jake like a river of liquid stars. He felt connected to everything, to the ship, to space itself, to every atom, dancing in the void. But most of all, he felt connected to Luna and her dragons like invisible threads binding their souls together. He opened his eyes, not remembering when he had closed them, and found himself on his knees. Luna was holding him up while both dragons perched on his shoulders. Their scales were glowing white hot, but their touch did not burn him. It accepted you, Luna whispered with amazement and something else in her voice. Even my father needed 3 attempts before it accepted him. Jake tried to speak, but only managed a croak. His throat felt like he had swallowed the sun. The blade was still in his hand, humming with contentment like a cat that had found its favorite person. The proximity alarm started screaming. Valdris is accelerating. Luna said, he must have realized what we are doing. We need to enter the storm now. Jake stood with effort and stumbled to the pilot's seat. The blade had changed him somehow. His vision was sharper and he could see energy patterns in space that had been invisible before. The storm ahead looked different now, less like a wall of death and more like a complex puzzle of forces. Sky Storm, Luna commanded in English. So Jake could understand. Protect this ship, protect these people, protect him. The dragons looked at each other and seemed to nod. Then they began to grow. It started slowly, like watching a balloon inflate. Their bodies expanded smoothly without losing their proportions. In seconds, they were the size of large dogs, then horses, then bigger. Their wings spread across the cockpit, and their tails wrapped around support beams. Jake felt the blade pulling energy from somewhere impossible and channeling it through him into the dragons. It should have killed him. But instead it felt like being part of an electric circuit where everything was in perfect balance. The dragons kept growing until they were too large for the ship, except they were not quite solid anymore. Jake could see through them like they were made of condensed energy. Their true forms existed partially outside, normal space wrapping around the ship like living shields. Now Luna shouted. Jake flew straight into the storm. The radiation that should have cooked them alive passed through like heavy rain on glass. The gravitational forces that should have torn the ship apart bent around them like water around a stone. They were sailing through hell itself, protected by dragons made of starlight, and Will behind them. Valdris tried to follow, but his ship's shields failed instantly. The storm grabbed his vessel, and Jake watched it spin away, trailing fire and debris. Maybe Valdris escaped in a pod, or maybe he died. Jake did not care either way. The passage through the storm took 6 hours. That felt like 6 years. Jake flew by instinct, following paths that the blade seemed to know. The dragons sang the entire time, their voices harmonizing with frequencies that made reality softer, more willing to bend. Luna stayed beside him, her hand on his shoulder, keeping him grounded when the power threatened to sweep him away into madness. Her father's consciousness had stopped complaining and was now offering advice through the bracelet, though Jake did not understand the language. The refugees in the cargo bay huddled together in prayer. Some were crying, some were singing along with the dragons in harmonies that had not been heard for centuries. They all knew they were witnessing something impossible. When they finally emerged from the storm, Jake collapsed. He woke up in his own bunk with a massive headache and the taste of copper in his mouth. Sky was curled up on his chest like a normal-sized cat, purring softly. Storm was perched on the headboard, watching him with protective eyes. "You slept for 2 days," Luna said from the doorway. Jake tried to sit up, but Sky refused to move. She weighed almost nothing, but her presence was impossibly heavy, like she was anchored to reality itself. "The blade," Luna said. "What happened to it?" Jake realized his right hand was still closed in a fist. When he opened, the crystal blade was there, but different. It had been clear before, but now it had veins of gold running through it like cracks filled with light. "It bonded with you?" Luna said with wonder. "That has never happened before. The blade always remained separate, but now it is part of you." Jake could feel it was true. The blade was not just in his hand, it was in his bones, his blood, his soul. He could call it, or dismiss it with a thought. When he let it go, it did not fall, but simply faded until he needed it again. "Your father must be thrilled," Jake said. Luna laughed, and the sound filled the small room with joy. "He has not stopped yelling for 2 days. He says no, humans should have this power. He says the ancient laws are being broken. He says many things, but I have stopped listening." She moved closer and sat on the edge of the bunk. Sky immediately crawled over to her, and Storm joined them. The dragons made a sound like contentment. The sanctuary of First Light was hidden inside a nebula that looked like spilled paint across the darkness. Jake had never seen anything like it before. Massive structures floating in clouds of colored gas that sparkled with its own light. The ancient Eldari had built this place when humans were still figuring out fire, and it showed in every impossible angle and gravity. Defying tower, Luna guided him through the approach while the dragons pressed against the cockpit windows like excited children. Their scales had turned bright silver, and they were making sounds Jake had never heard before, something between singing and crying. "They remember this place," Luna explained. "This is where they were hatched 300 years ago. They were the last natural birth before the sanctuary was abandoned." Jake carefully navigated between floating platforms that were each the size of cities. Some still had lights flickering in windows, though Luna assured him no one had lived here for decades. The war had emptied this place of life, leaving only memories and machines that did not know how to stop working. The main docking structure was a sphere made entirely of some translucent material that looked like frozen water. Jake could see through its walls to gardens inside where trees still grew despite 20 years of neglect. The docking bay itself was large enough to hold a battleship, and his small cargo vessel looked like a toy inside it. As soon as they landed, the refugees began pouring. Out of the cargo hold, many fell to their knees and kissed the deck, while others simply stood and wept. This was holy ground for the Eldari, a place most had only heard about in stories. Their voices echoed in the vast space as they sang songs of homecoming. Luna led Jake deeper into the sanctuary while the dragons flew ahead scouting. They had returned to their normal cat size, but Jake could feel their excitement through the strange bond the blade had created. It was like having 2 extra hearts beating with joy. The egg chamber was at the sanctuary's heart, protected by doors that required both genetic locks and quantum keys. Luna provided the genetics, while the blade in Jake's hand somehow knew the quantum frequencies needed the doors. Opened with a sound like the universe taking a breath. Inside, 12 eggs sat on pedestals that floated without any visible support. Each egg was different in color and pattern, from deep black with silver veins to pure white that hurt to look at. They were about the size of watermelons, but Jake could feel the life inside them, pressing against the shells, wanting to be born. Sky and Storm immediately flew to the eggs and began singing to them. Their voices harmonized in ways that made the air itself vibrate. The eggs responded with their own sounds, like heartbeats turned into music. One by one, they began to glow from within, but Luna was frowning. "Something is wrong," she said. "They should be hatching, but they are holding back." Jake moved closer to one of the eggs and felt the blade pulse in his hand. Without thinking, he reached out and touched the shell. The moment his fingers made contact, he understood the problem. "They are afraid," he said. "They can feel that the universe has changed. Their parents are gone, and they do not know if it is safe to be born." Luna looked at him strangely. "How could you know that?" "The blade knows," Jake answered, though that was not quite right. It was more like the blade translated what the eggs were feeling into something his human mind could understand. "Can you help them?" Luna asked. Jake was not sure, but he had to try. He called the blade into his hand and held it up. The crystal caught the light from the eggs and reflected it back, amplified, and changed. The golden veins in the blade began to pulse like a heartbeat. Through the bond, he could feel Sky and Storm adding their power to his. They were showing the eggs that it was safe, that there were still protectors in the universe, that love still existed, even after war and loss. The first egg cracked. A tiny dragon no bigger than Jake's thumb pushed its way out. Its scales were deep blue with gold edges, and its eyes were ancient despite being minutes old. It looked around the chamber, then flew straight to Jake and landed on his shoulder. "That is impossible," Luna gasped. "Dragons never bond with anyone except Eldari. They certainly do not choose humans." But the second egg was already cracking, and this dragon also flew to Jake. Soon he had 6 tiny dragons perched on him, while the other 6 chose Luna. They were all different colors and patterns, but they all sang the same song of new life and hope. Luna's fathers. Consciousness was having what could only be described as a complete meltdown. The bracelet was flashing rapidly, and Jake could hear the voice inside speaking so fast the words blurred together. Luna was trying to calm him, but she was also laughing too hard to be effective. "This is not how it was supposed to work," she said between giggles. "Dragons bond for life with one person. You just became the father to 6 dragons who will grow to the size of starships. This has never happened in our entire history." Jake looked at the tiny creatures who were now exploring his flight suit with curious chirps. They did not seem dangerous, but he remembered how Sky and Storm had protected the ship. He was starting to understand that he had stepped into something far bigger than a simple rescue mission. The refugees had found them, and were now crowding into the chamber. When they saw the baby dragons, they began to sing again, but this time with joy instead of sorrow. Some of the children reached out, and the dragons flew to them, creating bonds that crossed species lines. Luna watched this with tears in her eyes. "This is what my father never understood," she said. "The dragons do not care about the old laws or the old hatred. They just want to live and be loved." One of the refugees, an elderly female who had barely survived the pirate attack, approached Luna and spoke in rapid Eldari. Luna listened, then turned to Jake with a complex expression. "She wants to know if you will perform the ceremony," she said. "What ceremony?" Jake asked, though he suspected he knew. "The bonding ceremony," Luna said, looking at the floor. "You wield my family blade, you saved our people, you woke the dragons. The refugees want to know if you will make it official." Jake felt the baby dragons on his shoulders purr in encouragement. Sky and Storm were watching him with what looked like approval. Even the blade in his hand seemed to pulse with anticipation, but it was Luna's eyes that made the decision for him. In them he saw loneliness that matched his own hope, that had survived impossible odds, and something else that might have been love. "Yes," he said simply. The ceremony was held in the sanctuary's great hall, which had windows looking out into the nebula. The refugees had found ancient robes that almost fit Jake, and Luna wore armor that had belonged to her grandmother. The dragons, both baby and adult, flew overhead, creating patterns of light with their scales. An elder refugee spoke words in Eldari that Jake did not understand, but felt in his bones through the blade. Luna translated the important parts about unity between species, about new beginnings growing from old endings, about love being stronger than fear. When it came time to exchange vows, Luna spoke in English so Jake would understand fully. "I offer you my trust, my loyalty, and my dragons," she said with a smile. "I offer you a family not of blood but of choice. I offer you the stars themselves if you will take them." Jake thought about what to say. He was not good with words and did not know any ancient vows, but he spoke from his heart, which the blade seemed to amplify. "I offer you my ship, which is not much but it flies true," he said. "I offer you my protection, though you are stronger than me. I offer you my promise that your dragons will always have a safe place with me. I offer you my love, which I did not know I had to give." Luna kissed him then, and the dragons sang so loudly that the whole sanctuary rang like a bell. Her father's consciousness finally stopped complaining and said something that made Luna laugh. "What did he say?" Jake asked. "He said," Luna translated, "that at least you are brave even if you're human. And that bravery might be enough." The next 3 weeks were spent making the sanctuary livable again. The refugees worked to restore the gardens and living quarters. While Jake and Luna trained with the dragons, the babies grew quickly, reaching dog size in days. They each had different personalities and abilities. The blue one Jake had named Comet could become invisible. The gold one, called Sunny, could generate heat that could melt steel. The green one, named Forest, could accelerate plant growth. The possibilities were endless and slightly terrifying. Sky and Storm took their roles as parents, seriously teaching the babies how to fly, fight, and most importantly, how to control their power. Jake learned that dragons were not weapons but partners who chose to help those they loved. Luna spent her days teaching Jake about Eldari culture and technology, while he taught her about human stubbornness and improvisation. They made an odd couple, the 7-foot-tall blue elf and the average human cargo pilot. But somehow it worked. Her father's consciousness eventually accepted the situation, though he never stopped making sarcastic comments. Through the bracelet, he taught Jake the deeper mysteries of the blade, including how to use it to navigate space in ways that violated several laws of physics. One evening, as they watched the baby dragons play in the anti-gravity gardens, Luna told Jake the truth about the war. "It was not about territory or resources," she said. "It was about fear. Humans expanded so fast and adapted so quickly that the Eldari thought you would replace us, but the dragons never saw you as threats. They saw you as potential friends." Jake held her hand, which still felt electric after all these weeks, and now 6 months had passed since the ceremony, and Jake still woke up sometimes wondering if it had all been a dream. But then he would see Luna sleeping beside him with her silver hair spread across the pillow like starlight, and feel the baby dragons nested around them like scaly puppies, and know it was real. The sanctuary had transformed from an abandoned relic into a thriving colony. More Eldari refugees arrived every week, drawn by rumors of a place where the old hatred did not matter. Some humans had even come, including Jake's old friend Marcus, who nearly fainted when he saw the dragons. "You married an elf warrior princess and became father to space dragons," Marcus had said after 3 drinks. "And I thought my life was interesting because I got a new coffee machine today. Was special, though, because today the dragons would show what they had learned." Jake stood in the sanctuary's training sphere, a massive zero-gravity chamber where young Eldari had once learned to fight in 3 dimensions. The baby dragons, who were not babies anymore, floated around him. Each was now the size of a large horse with wings that could stretch across a room. "Ready?" Sky asked. Jake still jumped sometimes when the dragons spoke. They had learned human language, faster than anyone expected, and their voices sounded like music mixed with thunder. Sky and Storm could speak fluently, while the younger ones were still learning. "Ready?" Jake confirmed and activated the blade. The crystal sword appeared in his hand, glowing with golden veins that matched the patterns on his arms. The blade had been changing him slowly, making him stronger, faster, able to survive in space for short periods without a suit. Luna said he was becoming something new, neither human nor Eldari, but a bridge between both. The training began with Storm creating obstacles out of condensed energy while the young dragons had to navigate them using their unique abilities. Comet flickered in and out of visibility. Sunny melted through. Barriers, forest grew vines in zero gravity that should not have been possible. Jake flew among them using the blade to propel himself through space. The weapon was not just for fighting, but for movement communication and connection to the quantum field that dragons used to manipulate reality. Luna watched from the observation deck with several refugee children who had become fascinated by the dragons. She was teaching them the old songs that helped dragons grow strong and wise. Her father's consciousness added commentary through the bracelet, though his criticism had become more playful than harsh. The training was interrupted by an alarm ships approaching the sanctuary. Their defensive system announced multiple vessels bearing human military signatures. Jake and Luna met in the command center where holographic displays showed 15 human warships dropping out of hyperspace. They were arranged in attack formation with weapons powered and shields raised. "This is Admiral Harrison. Of the Earth Defense Fleet," a voice crackled over communications. "We have reports of illegally harbored Eldari technology and demand immediate surrender." Jake recognized the name. Admiral Harrison was a war hero who had never accepted the peace treaty. He believed the Eldari were just waiting to attack again and had spent 20 years trying to prove it. "Let me talk to them," Jake said. Luna shook her head. "They will not listen. They came here to fight." The blade pulsed in Jake's hand, and through it he could feel all 12 young dragons plus Sky and Storm. They were not afraid but eager to protect their home. Their combined power could probably destroy the human fleet, but that would start the war all over again. "I have an idea," Jake said, "but your father is not going to like it." Luna's father's consciousness immediately started protesting, but Jake was already moving. He went to the communication console and opened a channel to the human fleet. "Admiral Harrison. This is Jake Morrison, former cargo pilot and current resident of the Sanctuary Morrison." The Admiral replied, "You are harboring dangerous aliens and their weapons. You will surrender immediately, or we will take you by force." Jake smiled, though the Admiral could not see it. "I am not harboring anyone, Admiral. I married into the family. These are my people now, and I would like to show you something before anyone could stop him." Jake activated the Sanctuary's biggest display screen and sent a signal that would appear on every monitor in the human fleet. The image showed the main garden where human and Eldari children were playing together while baby dragons flew overhead. It showed the medical bay where human doctors worked alongside Eldari healers. It showed the dining hall where both species shared meals and stories. But most importantly, it showed Jake and Luna standing together with all 14 dragons arranged around them like a family portrait. "These are not weapons," Admiral Jake said. "These are living beings who chose to bond with both humans and Eldari. They do not see the difference between us. Why should we?" The fleet held position but did not advance. Jake could imagine the chaos on their bridges as they tried to process what they were seeing. "Let me come aboard," Jake offered. "I will bring one dragon to show you they are not threats. Give me 1 hour to prove that peace is not just possible but already happening." The channel was silent for a long time. 1 hour, Admiral Harrison finally said. "One dragon. And if you try anything, my fleet will turn that sanctuary into dust." Jake chose Sunny because she had the gentlest personality, despite her ability to generate stellar heat. Luna wanted to come, but Jake convinced her to stay and keep the other dragons calm. The last thing they needed was 14 protective dragons following him into danger. The human flagship was everything Jake remembered from his time visiting military vessels during cargo runs. Cold metal corridors, efficient design, and soldiers who looked at him like he was insane when he walked in with a horse-sized golden dragon. Admiral Harrison was older than Jake expected, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much war. He studied Sunny with the expression of someone looking at a nuclear bomb that had learned to purr. "You bonded with this creature," he said. "Not quite a question." "She chose me," Jake corrected. "Sunny. Tell the Admiral." "Hello." "Hello," Admiral Sunny said in her musical voice. "I am Sunny. I like warm places and fruit. And when Jake reads stories to us." The Admiral stepped back so fast he nearly fell. His staff reached for weapons, but Sunny just tilted her head with curiosity. You are afraid, she observed. That is okay. We were afraid too when we hatched. But Jake and Luna showed us that fear goes away when you understand each other. Over the next hour, Jake told the Admiral everything: the pirate attack rescuing Luna, the journey through the storm, the hatching of the eggs, the ceremony that bound human and Eldari together. He showed videos the refugees had recorded of daily life in the sanctuary, but it was Sunny who really convinced them. She played with the younger crew members, letting them touch her warm scales. She demonstrated her abilities by heating the Admiral's cold coffee to the perfect temperature. She even curled up next to the ship's cat, who immediately started purring. These creatures could destroy us all. Admiral Harrison said quietly. Yes, Jake agreed. But they choose not to. Just like you. Could destroy the sanctuary, but I hope you choose not to. The Admiral was quiet for a long time, watching Sunny teach a young ensign how to make her scales change color. The war took my son, he finally said. He was at Broken Moons with your father, I think. They both died believing the fighting would never end. Jake felt the blade pulse with memory. Luna's father had been at that battle too, leading the Eldari fleet. 3 fathers had died that day, leaving 3 children to find a better way. Maybe they would be happy to know their children found peace, Jake suggested. The Admiral looked old and tired, but something in his eyes had softened. What do you need from us? Recognition, Jake said. Come to the sanctuary. See what we are building. Let your crew meet the refugees and dragons. Let them see that the war is truly over. It took 3 days, but eventually the entire human fleet visited the sanctuary in small groups. They met the dragons, played with the children, learned Eldari songs, and tasted alien food. Some were suspicious at first, but dragons had a way of melting hearts, especially when they wanted belly rubs. Admiral Harrison spent hours talking with Luna's father's consciousness through the bracelet. 2 old warriors comparing stories and realizing they had more in common than they thought. The bracelet translated everything, and Jake could hear them laughing about shared experiences. On the last day, the Admiral made an announcement. The Earth Defense Fleet officially recognizes the Sanctuary, a first light, as a neutral colony under joint human-Eldari protection. Any attack on this place will be considered an act of war against both species. The refugees celebrated while the dragons flew loops overhead, breathing colored fire like fireworks. Jake and Luna stood together, watching their impossible family grow larger. You know what this means, Luna said. Jake nodded. Word would spread about the sanctuary. More people would come, both human and Eldari. The dragons would choose new partners, creating bonds that no government could break. Peace would grow from the bottom up, starting with individuals who chose love over fear. That night, as Jake lay in bed with Luna beside him, and dragons piled around them like a living blanket, he thought about his old life as a lonely cargo pilot. That person seemed like a stranger now, someone who had existed before the universe revealed its magic. Luna stirred in her sleep and murmured something in Eldari. The translator told him it meant brave human. Jake smiled and pulled her closer.